All right, hey there, class. We're going to have a review on chapter 13, all about choosing life. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy this and it'll help you out with studying for your test. So, we talked about how Jesus summed up all 10 commandments into the 2 great commandments. And the first one was, hope you guys all know this, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Or as we summed it up, love God. And he summed up the second 7 commandments, okay, because that one sums up the first 3, with love your neighbor as yourself, or as we said, love others. So love God and love others. And then we asked ourselves, well, what do those 2 rules tell us about life and love? And we discussed what it calls us to do in life, which is to love as Jesus did and to cherish all life. Remember, that's not just human life, all life. We reverence all human beings. Remember, reverence is to treat someone with great respect and that we avoid anything that harms humans. And then we spent the rest of the chapter discussing Christian love as well as those things that can harm humans. So those stories of love, the first one was about the little boy who donated his blood to the little girl, his friend. And then we read the parable of the Good Samaritan that taught us all about loving our neighbor. And we came up with some words to describe Christian love. Words like unconditional, selfless, total, forgiving, and sacrificial. Because remember, it's unconditional in that you're not putting a limit on it. You do it without saying, oh, I love you only if this. Okay, it's selfless. You're giving things up, just like it's sacrificial. You make a sacrifice. You give something up that you want to help this other person because you love them. And the big thing that we always talk about with Christian love is that it's not easy. Okay, we talk about Mr. Tighe saying how it's doing the thing that makes you uncomfortable. So it's not easy to love as Jesus did. Then we got the new understanding of the 10 Commandments from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Okay, we talked about the Beatitudes in there and the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And Jesus kind of reworked the commandments in that he doesn't just want you to follow them this way, he wants you to follow them this way. And we talked about some of the things that he put in there, like don't be angry and not seeking revenge and loving your enemies. Okay, and that's kind of where we got into the letter or the spirit of the law, because he doesn't want us to just do exactly what the law says. We know that the 5th commandment says, thou shalt not kill. However, that goes beyond just killing a person. Okay, we talked about how it's respecting life, caring for yourself, caring for others, both human life, animals, plants, all life on earth is a gift from God. So that's when we go beyond that idea of the letter of the law and we follow the spirit of the law. Okay, it goes beyond just what the law says. It's a greater meaning to it. Then we got into those crimes against life that we discussed. First one was scandal, which you all know is bad example. And we also know how Jesus feels about scandal. We remember what his punishment was for those who do, lead others to sin. He does consider it a very serious offense. The next one that we discussed was abortion, which is the killing of an embryo or a fetus before birth. Okay, and we discussed what the church has as punishment for abortion, which was excommunication. And we know that excommunication is when we are cut off from the church and the sacraments. Okay, so we want to make sure that we know not only what excommunication is, but how it tied into this chapter was that it's the result of committing an abortion. All right, suicide is the taking of your own life. And we talked about, how some people feel that that's the only option. And then we got into those other options, those other ways that you can get through a crisis. And we said giving yourself time. Because remember, what seemed so bad yesterday or last week or 2 years ago maybe isn't so bad now. That sometimes you just need to wait it out. You need to give yourself some time. The next one was to talk to someone, whether it's a friend or a family member or a teacher, okay? If you're upset about something, you go to someone and you talk it out with them. The third was to get involved. Sometimes just getting your mind off of whatever your crisis may be can help you to feel better, whether it's a sport or an activity, a hobby, service of some kind. And it was to reach out, maybe talk to somebody else who has gone through this same crisis that you had. They can help you out. And the last one was to bring your concerns to God. Obviously, what we always want to do is to pray and talk to God about what's bothering us, because we know He's always there for us. The next thing we discussed was euthanasia. Remember, this is not young people in Asia. It is the mercy killing or the direct intervention to end life for the purpose of ending human suffering. And we discussed how this is not the same as taking somebody off life support, okay? Because we as Catholics believe allowing a person to die without artificial support is not wrong. We talked about how that has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And we talked about peace and what it means, all right? And we came up with our own definitions, and we kind of molded those together and came up with a group definition of it's not just the absence of war. Remember, peace is not just fight, or not just the opposite of fighting, but it's also a feeling of calmness both within us and around us. Okay, so peace goes beyond just the opposite of war. And then we talked about war and violence and how it's not just that image that comes to our head of the military and tanks. We talked a little bit about the Cold War and how it was fought with words, and how, threats against somebody can be just as hurtful as actual violence. How can we stop it? You can control your own actions and stop violence coming from yourself and coming from your friends, even if you can't stop it worldwide right now. Talked about capital punishment and the taking of a criminal's life as a form of punishment. We remember that we do not have the right to take away somebody else's life. Okay? God gives us life and God ends our life. That is not a human right to do that. We talked about the alternative of a life sentence in prison. Prejudice we discussed as the unreasonable dislike of a particular group of people. If you remember, I kind of showed that to you with, the girls get +5 points and the boys start the test with -5 points. There's no reason for that, okay? The whole idea of it being unreasonable, okay, other than you're a girl, you're a boy. Okay, so focus in. Prejudice is the unreasonable dislike. Then we got into the 3 examples of that your book gave, which were our 3 isms. Sexism, obviously, we talked about unequal wages for women and men. Racism, regarding a race as inferior to others. And ageism. Remember, we put it as a person's age, because sometimes there's ageism against the elderly, and sometimes it's against children or younger people, okay, that we feel they're less competent because they're young. Then we talked about the corporal works of mercy and how they take care of a person's physical needs, their bodily needs, like feeding the hungry and giving drink to the thirsty. And we did copy those down from 243 into your notes. I told you, make sure you're familiar with them. Make sure you know what it means to care for somebody's physical needs, giving them shelter, giving them clothing, visiting them when they're sick. And then we talked about the spiritual works of mercy that Jesus also gave us in the Sermon on the Mount, and how they take care of a person's spiritual needs or their soul, praying for them and forgiving them, counseling them, comforting them. Okay, all of those things that can make your soul feel better, your heart feel better. So that was the end of our chapter. Okay, make sure, once you watch this, take the practice test. You guys will be fine. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Good luck.